Good morning, guys. This is Wednesday, September 9th, and I'm recording your lesson for today. I'm going to post in Google Classroom a vocabulary sheet to go along with your lesson on identifying and classifying animals. And then I'll also have a review sheet posted in there as well. It actually has the word test on it. It's not a test, it's just a review sheet that you're gonna fill out after we get through the lesson. So as I'm teaching today, we need to be going through the vocabulary, and all the vocab will be in bold through the presentation, so just fill out this sheet as you go, or as I go. I might add something in there that you also need to write down or know, so you can write that off to the side, write it on the back of your vocab sheet, or if you want to keep a separate note sheet, that would be fine too, however you want to keep organized. This is a supplemental lesson to go along with your species identification. So that big chart you filled out with porcine and bovine, equine, farrowing, foaling, all those scientific names you guys filled out of your big organizer. This is a lesson that breaks things down a little bit more in detail of how that came about and how we came up with that identification way of classifying organisms. So this is part of your advanced animal life science class that you get your dual credit in. In vet science, what we're talking about, just a reminder where we're at there, is we were talking about canine behavior and handling and safety. I've kind of put that on hold for the time being until all of you get back. So just make sure you hung on to those notes, you have those notes. We will do a lab when you get back with some canine behavior stuff. So I'm just gonna forge ahead with the advanced animal life science, because I think you guys can pretty easily just follow along with the video and understand what's going on. Okay, so we'll buzz through the objectives here. There's your vocab. Okay, so we're talking about this hierarchy, taxonomy, and how animals are classified. So how did this is way back, the beginning of time, how did we start to identify different species and name them and put them into groups with like characteristics? So taxonomy is the science of identifying and naming organisms, and this is all the way from different kinds of bacteria, different kinds of fungi, different kind of animals, so anything that's living. And as we identify, we can call animals, which is super generalized, a lot of different animals fall under the word of animals, but then we put them into groups such as reptiles and amphibians and mammals. So we start to get more specific on the like characteristics of these species, and we divide them into more specific, smaller groups. So then we can call a dog, or a cat, because they have more like characteristics. So taxonomy is the big overview of how we get to that name, and then we use our hierarchy class system to narrow it down to exactly what genus species that we're talking about. And that was the system that they came up with. So these, you guys may have heard of these in a biology class before, or a science class, but the taxonomic classification consists of 7 levels of organization. And this you need to know. Each of these words on your vocab sheet, you're going to break down and write down the definition. But I'm telling you that you're also going to need to know these in order. And they're in order on your presentation. They're not in order on your vocab sheet. You may have heard of the mnemonic King Philip. What is it? King Philip came over for good spaghetti or grape soda or whatever. I'll write that on the board for you. It kind of helps you just remember the order of these. So the first one is kingdom. This is the highest category in the Linnaean system of classification. And we're going to get into what that Linnaean means. It's just Carolus Linnaeus was the person who came up with this classification system. So all living organisms are classified into one of the 5 kingdoms. So there actually are 5 subdivisions within the class of kingdom. And these you're also going to have to know as well. So where you see that plantae, animalia, fungi, Protista, and Monera. So this is the only one, this kingdom class, this big one at the top, is the only one that has these subcategories underneath it. And that you also have to know those as well. I think later on in the presentation it might hit on those again. But you do need to make sure you write down those 5 different kingdoms inside that first classification. Okay, the second one, as we're moving down the ladder and we're getting things a little more grouped up into like characteristics, is phylum. And this is just the classification immediately below kingdom. And this is where animals start to be grouped together based on their basic body plan or their organization. So something really general, such as, okay, we're all people in here, but now let's start getting it narrowed down. We have males, male, and females. So that's just another general, okay, let's start separating these into like characteristics. So there's all different ways we can classify and look at groups of things that are alike. But phylum is the one that starts to narrow it down. Class is simply the level that's below phylum. Again, you guys do have to know these in order. And simply, the members of a class have even more characteristics in common. So if we start looking at people, male, female, then we can start going, okay, blonde hair, brown hair, red hair, or something even more specific. You could go by height. We're starting to look at things that are just more in common, that we can narrow down the species and give them a specific name. I know.
She really said no.
She's horrible.
She's taking some of my lap and taking it.
I know, she's like, hold me, love me.
It's fine.
Have you guys learned some of this before, like in a biology?
middle
Okay.
schools.
Usually when I start doing these lessons, students are like, oh yeah, I kind of know a little bit of this. So that's why I don't spend forever on a day on this stuff. We just kind of go through it. Are you guys all done writing? Okay. Okay, now we have order. And simply, this is just getting more narrowed down. So order is the level of classification immediately below class. These definitions are super easy because all they're doing is itemizing them in order that they go. Family is the level below order. Genus is directly above species or below family, either one. And genus is where we're getting really closely related into actually calling a horse, a cow, a cow. Species is where we are there. We know exactly what this organism is, what this animal is. So members of a species, we're so specific now that these are identified of species that can breed and they can produce offspring. That's how closely related they are. Now, when we talk really specifically, we can actually break down our animal names into a genus and species names, and that's just the most specific way of naming something. We did scientific names for this class, and I'm going to stick with that. We're going to stick with that feline, canine, bovine, equine. We're going to do those. But if I really wanted to be mean to you, I'd make you memorize all the genus species names. I don't find that necessary for this class, but that would mean, you got to have the correct capital letter, make sure you underline it. And like Felis domesticus would be a cat. We're going to go with feline for in here. I think that's going to benefit you more in your vet med career. You're not going to go around calling a cat a feline domesticus, but you might hear feline. So I want you guys to be familiar with the terms that are commonly used. But also just be aware that there is more specific names for all of our animals and living things. Genus is right above species. Genus.
Oh,
is- Yep. Yep. Right below family. Yeah. So species is going to be your last one. Those animals can reproduce, or those bacteria, fungi, whatever. She's so helpful, isn't she? Golly. Good? Okay. Okay. Carolus Linnaeus was just the person who developed this binomial nomenclature, which is the system that we use to name organisms. And I think his name's just on like your review sheet once. We don't have to know a ton about him. I just want you to be aware that he's the person, this Carolus Linnaeus. I think I say that right. I'm pretty sure I do. So this was in the mid-18th century, so a long time ago. And all you need to know about that binomial nomenclature, it's just the system used to name our organisms. These names are Latin. And I was just talking about how there's always a genus name and a species name. I'm not going to make you memorize that for all of our organisms again. We're going to stick with the sheet that I gave you, that organizer that I gave you. But it just is just an FYI, and you guys probably already know some of this stuff. Okay, when we talked about kingdom and those 5 subcategories of kingdom, I was pretty sure it did go into a little bit more into here. So as long as you know the 5 subdivisions of the kingdom, so this Monera is the first one, that consists, that's not a vocab on your sheet, is it? Let me just make sure. Okay, let me just double check something real quick. Okay, so what you do need to know is that this Monera is part of the subdivision of the kingdoms, and also, that's not on your vocab sheet, you need to write down that little dash. The Monera kingdom contains unicellular organisms that are prokaryotic, and we're going to talk about that. That has to do with the cell structure of what makes up this Monera family. So you do need to know that they are unicellular, that means one. So single-celled organisms that are prokaryotic. And all prokaryotic means is that these cells don't have a membrane-bounded nucleus. So you can picture a cell. We have the inside of the cell has a nucleus, and a prokaryotic cell doesn't have a membrane bounding that nucleus. Like in our eukaryotic cells, animal cells, people cells, we do. So, you need to know this Monera. It's one of the subdivisions of kingdom. That's the first one of our classifications. And that what makes it Monera is this unicellular organisms that are prokaryotic. And then go on to write your vocab for prokaryotic cells. So this is going to be like bacteria. Bacteria are just one-celled organisms. So that would be, we're talking about bacteria in this subdivision of kingdom. Are we okay? Okay. Stop me if you have a question. Okay, number 2 is Protista. And this is the other side of organisms that are eukaryotic. So know that Protista is one of the 5 subdivisions of the kingdom. And these consist of eukaryotic organisms. And then write your vocab for eukaryotic cells. These have a nucleus that is separated from the cytoplasm of the cell by a nuclear membrane. So these would be like our animal cells, our people cells. Plant cells, fungi. Fungi. These consist of multicellular, so now we're talking more than one cell, that are eukaryotic, which just talks about that cell-bounded membrane within the cell. Fungi are also known as heterotrophic organisms, and that means they must consume other organisms or products to gain energy. So if you can, they have a picture of fungus on bread. So if you can picture a fungus as things that grow on other things, feed off other things. We were talking about ringworm with my second years the other day. They have to feed off the surface of the skin to grow. Mushrooms, you'll see mushrooms that grow and feed off other things. So they have to obtain their energy by that decomposing dead organisms, absorb their nutrients. They can be alive too, but a lot of times that's where we see fungi growing. Other examples they have on there too: yeast, molds, mushrooms, mildews. Those are all part of the fungi kingdom. Okay. Yes. No, you're fine. Okay. Plantae is the kingdom that consists of immobile, multicellular, eukaryotic organisms that are autotrophic. So these are our plants, basically, that they can produce their own food through photosynthesis, which I'm sure you've learned about since elementary school, of how plants make their food with sun and soil and energy and oxygen and things. So all of our plants fall into this Plantae kingdom. And if you break that down, immobile, and they're not moving around, multicellular, and they have multiple cells. If we're going to look at plant cells, they're eukaryotic, that has to do with the membrane, and they're autotrophic, which they can produce their own food through photosynthesis. So that's our plants. I can't believe she stays up there for that long. Like, it just hangs out. Like, yeah. Good. Okay, our last one. Animalia are multicellular, heterotrophic, and eukaryotic organisms that are mobile. So these are where our animals come in. Sponges, worms, insects, fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. All of those are in this kingdom of Animalia. So that's a big group. If we're putting insects and mammals in the same group, that's big. So that's why we have to have that system of breaking things down further. Gosh, dang it. These dogs are so needy. Guy, Dexter, get down. Dottie. Oh my word.
And the kid that she jumped on the desk for, did he have to like put her down, or would she?
No, he just let her sit there.
Well, I meant like at the end of class. Would she
Oh, yeah,
Go
I-
and get down. 'Cause
I
can't tell
think
if
she
she's
always
trying-
lifted her. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that's what I figured.
yeah. I'd be like, Jared, you can put her down. No, she's okay.
I just couldn't tell if she was down or not because she's like falling right here at the edge.
Oh, she might. Yeah, maybe she does. That might be her sign. To, please lift me down.
I didn't
What
do
a
that
brat.
yesterday too.
They're always full of it in the morning. Okay. Are we good? Good, good.
Dog hair.
Okay, so what was created in research was this taxonomic key, kind of like a map key. It helps you look at these different characteristics so you can actually narrow down and name these organisms. So it's used to identify an object unknown to you, but that an expert has described. So you can use this key to navigate your way through an organism or an object to help you identify it, basically. Okay, we don't really need to know much. You don't have to write anything down here. This just wants you to know that you can eliminate, as you're going through this key, you can eliminate different things and then group them together. That helps you identify an organism. So you just follow along with the key. They have like a different, like desert, cropland, color. So like they have just a little key down there for an example. Another example would be like coins. You have a quarter, you have a nickel, you have a dime, you have smooth edges, some are silver, the penny's obviously copper. So you could identify a coin if you were using some kind of like a key to help you come to the naming of whatever object you're looking at. So I think we can understand why we would use a key to get to the name of something. Okay. So now when we're talking, this is kind of going into more vertebrate evolutions and different characteristics of fish and birds and mammals. So we're going to do some vocab out of here. So a notochord, when we're talking about notochord species, this is a cartilaginous-like supportive structure just beneath the nerve cord that's replaced by a vertebral column in vertebrates. So vertebrates would be, things that actually have a vertebrae spine, if you can imagine a bony-like structure. So notochords start off with this cartilaginous, so like a softer material, and it turns into a vertebrae. So fish. These are our fish. So the class of Osteichthyes, which is a harder word to say, Osteichthyes is our class of bony fish. There are over 26,000 species of bony fish. So some of the characteristics of this Osteichthyes family, they list on there. The main one you need to know is that they have a swim bladder. And a swim bladder is not like hold urine type bladder in a fish. The swim bladder, it prevents them from sinking. Obviously, if you can imagine, fish don't sink to the bottom. Some hang out at the bottom, but they don't sink. And it aids in their respiration. So that's the swim bladder. So these are just some of the characteristics that we see with this Osteichthyes and these notochords species. So that's just a vocab that you need to know. It'll be a vocab on your review sheet that I posted. The class of aves, all you need to know by that is that means birds. Have you guys ever heard of the word avian? That is the scientific name for birds. Yep, so the class of aves is birds. And they break down some more sub-characteristics that I'm not going to ask you about, but just so you're aware. How do we know these are birds? What are some characteristics they have that are alike? Well, they have feathers. They have scales on their legs. They have well-developed lungs. They have hard-shelled eggs. So they have a 4-chambered heart. There are so many different classifications that we can put together and group together within these species. They have wings for flying, and they're endothermic. Endothermic is a word I want you to know. Endothermic animals have the ability to maintain their own body temperature by generating and maintaining metabolic heat. Birds and mammals are endothermic, so we are endothermic, dogs are endothermic, cows are endothermic. And what that basically means is, you know, our body temperature is 98.6, but if I walk outside and it's only 20 degrees out, does my body temperature drop to 20 degrees? No. It remains around 98.6 because our bodies are able to metabolize and generate that heat to maintain our internal temperature. And that's the same with dogs and cats, cows, horses. Now, could it drop a little bit in the dead cold of winter when you go take a temperature of one of our cows in the winter? Could it be dropped a couple degrees? Yeah, a couple, maybe. That would be normal. And on a really, really hot day, if they've been running around the pasture and they're worked up, could it be elevated a little bit? Yes, that's true, but not to a very severe degree. And your body maintains your same temperature unless you have some kind of illness or something, you know, immunocompromising you from being able to do that. Okay, the Mammalia class, just write this off to the side. The Mammalia class, what you need to know is just a couple of these characteristics, but you guys know what mammals are. So they have mammary glands, they nurse their babies, they have hair or fur, they're endothermic. The young develop in a uterus, they don't hatch. They do have a 4-chambered heart. If you wrote down 3 of these, like characteristics of these, that would be fine. So if you write down 3 of those, that I'll make them all in the same group. But this would be the one, obviously, I think you're the most familiar with. Me as well. I don't really know a ton about fish and everything. But our mammals, you guys, I'm confident, will pull out a lot of like characteristics of mammals. So we broke down our fish with our notochords and the Osteichthyes class of fish, our birds with our Aves class, and now we're talking about our mammals, which is that Mammalia class. So just some of those broken down for you. Okay, very good. You don't have to do anything on this review, so ignore that slide. And I will hand out the review sheets to the students that are in class today. And then again, those of you that are virtual today, I'm going to post the actual review sheet. Again, this is what it looks like. So you need to make sure for this lesson, you have all your vocab filled out on your vocab sheet, and then make sure you complete the review sheet. If you would like to screenshot those and upload them in Google Classroom for me, that would be fine. If you want to hang on to them and bring them to class whenever you return, whenever that will be, we'll just be waiting your arrival. If you want to hang on to them, that's perfectly fine too. So that's it for today. Just make sure you get that review sheet completed and the vocab sheet completed. And hopefully we will see you maybe tomorrow or Friday.